gotta talk about the CBA.
CBA.
There's been an update. So out of all the things that have been loud, the one thing that's been quiet has been kind of from the bargaining front up until yesterday. And now we know why. The players, the league, they were in the room and they're actually making some genuine progress. So I think, like, first of all, in my eyes, this is all very good news. Regardless of what we think about the money and the proposal and all of that, progress is being made. So the latest proposal, first reported by the AP, the league is now offering a $1.1 million max, a $220 million minimum, and an average salary of about $460,000. I have some questions about how you get to that. Mm-hmm. But essentially, if you multiply that by 180, which is the amount of players that you're estimating to be in the WNBA, you have an $82 million cap, which is an increase of about 4x. Now divide that by, like, the fact that, you're adding new teams and stuff. Mm-hmm. It's a little closer to 3 for, like, each player individually. But the big thing is revenue share. And in all of the reporting that I've seen, there has been no asterisk this time to the reporting on the revenue share. There's no threshold that's being reported that revenue has to get to before it triggers sharing, which is, I think, what the players have been fighting for this entire time. It is the biggest sticking point in the negotiations. The language still, like, we're going to find out more as information sort of trickles down about what exactly that looks like, the revenue share percentage. But overall, good news, in my opinion. Andrew, what was your sort of initial reaction?
It made me rethink NECA announcing to Project B a little more, like knowing that the progress and discussion has been progressing has made that particular announcement a much more intriguing one to me, because the thought process that I first had when this all began was, okay, if she's going to Project B, yes, you could look at that as a leverage point, or you could look at it as, oh my God, they might actually walk away from the table. And I think what this shows is the idea of walking away completely from this is not an option the players seem to be considering. And I think that part of it is important because, you lock into the 30-day extension, you're able to actually sit down, and the first reporting we get out of the new negotiation set is that some of the money is better and the revenue share does not have the string attached. Like, it signals that there's at least some give on the ownership side, that they're willing to meet the players, but it also feels like the players still know that there's a little bit of juice to be gotten out of the fruit, but I think they understand that this is a pretty good deal as is currently constructed. Do I think they can get more? Probably a lot more, probably not. If I'm somebody that is advising the players, I wouldn't say take this one, but I'd probably say, like, the second or third iteration of where we go from here is probably the one. Realistically speaking, my argument has always been you need to have a pay scale if you are a true bona fide professional sport that takes itself seriously. You need to have a pay scale that allows rookies to live in any one of your cities and not be living paycheck to paycheck. And as somebody, like, I grew up in Metro New York. I have lived in Sacramento. I have lived in Denver. I have lived in Oregon, Vermont, New Hampshire, and there's one other state in there. But, like, I've seen Wyoming, but that doesn't count. I've seen the difference of, like, affordability versus unaffordability, and, like, how much different, 80 to 85 in Northern California is versus, like, what $30,000 to $35,000, is pre-COVID in, a college town in Oregon, for instance, right? And the thing for me is, you need to allow rookies to be able to live and save and, like, have futures on their own if they are basically the next generation every year of a product that looks like it could be making billions of dollars in the next handful of years. I don't necessarily think that the highest earners need to earn super high. Like, my one semi-controversial take when it comes to, like, the labor stuff is I actually think revenue share and getting a bigger cut of that is what you would want in exchange for having the salaries maybe be a little bit more depressed. I would actually rather a max player. In this case, I think a max player, if the deal is $1.1 million for a max and the rev share for the league is 52-48 in favor of the players, or you do $2 million on a max and it's 45 to 55 players to league on a rev share. I'm taking the lesser max salary to get the higher rev share. Because I think the more money the league makes, the more you have that gets dispersed to people. And it's a much more equitable solution to everybody in the league that contributes to the overall making of that product, right? So as long as there are no stipulations and there is no criteria or threshold that takes an audit of basketball-related income off the table, then I think this is a good. Because as you had mentioned, like, the threshold in past CBAs allowed the WNBA and NBA to go to the Players Association and say, you haven't even hit the threshold, so we can't even open the books and argue about what basketball-related income is or is not. And so if you take that away, it forces the opening of the books, which is the thing that I think has been at the center of this fight from the beginning. The minute the books open, the deal becomes good. And so I think this is moving in the right direction for the players. I wouldn't take it yet, but I think we're closer, a lot closer, in fact, than we were probably a month ago.
Yeah, I will say the rate of progress it feels like it's accelerated to a degree that I don't think any of us really predicted. But that's obviously great news. I think that you get into some interesting wrinkles here because when you talk about revenue sharing and what a maximum contract is, when, like, for example, coming from covering the NBA, when somebody says a supermax contract is $45 million, $50 million, what they mean is that it's 35% of the current cap, and that's what those numbers are. Like, and salary increases are just projections of basketball related income increasing, right? So a max contract at $1.1 million, I'm not sure exactly what that calculation would be in a revenue sharing model, but really, like, that's what you're looking at. Like, what percentage of the cap are you looking to get? And that's the same with, like, things like, I'll make another NBA comparison with, like, the mid-level exception, the biannual exception. Like, we look at those things as hard numbers because it's a lot more digestible for fans to say $20 million and like 17.5 or whatever it might be. So I completely agree with you there. That would be it's just a much better way of going about things for the players. I'm also curious what basketball-related income will actually be considered, because if you look back at the first revenue sharing deal that was proposed, it said that it didn't include team revenue. It would only include league revenue. That's still like a pretty significant chunk that includes all league-wide sponsorships, for example, but that doesn't include gate revenue, team sponsorships. It does include the media rights deal, of course, but the team operating revenue is obviously a huge piece of this as well. So I'm kind of curious to see, what that looks like as well, because I think that's a huge piece of it. And then I also wonder what the players have as bargaining chips in their favor, and also what the league has, because one of the things that the league has kind of decided that it doesn't even want to go for is exclusivity. It seems like right now the owners are basically looking at, these leagues are popping up like Project B. We've had Unrivaled. And maybe the owners are basically just looking at it saying, we're not going to be able to even pay you guys enough to be able to actually even bargain for exclusivity. So that's off the table. They've kind of taken it off the table. Now, if you're a WNBA player, maybe you're saying that's fine. I'll go make all this this money here and I'll make all this money over there too. Like, that might be something that they're okay with as well. The other thing is roster expansion. I think roster expansion is something that fans and players and team personnel have all been pushing for. And we haven't really seen anything about that. So it also makes me wonder, and it kind of puts players in this position where, are you going to bargain for more money? Or are you going to, the league has kind of put you in this position. Are you going to fight for things that are actually going to shepherd, a better foundation for the league going forward, right? As far as that goes.
Well, and I think that's what we have to be careful about now as we're analyzing the end game of this, right? Because I think, especially, I consider myself as someone that is reporting on a lot of what's happening here, but also someone that's analyzing a lot of what's happening here. I am a pretty ardently pro-labor, pro-player mindset. Like, if you're coming to me to read my stuff, that's what you are going to see. That it is going to be told from the perspective of a more pro-labor bent. However, I think what is very important is once you start getting to the end game of the negotiations, that's where people have to understand that this is how the business side of this works. When you get out at the front of the negotiation, that is when, you gnash teeth and you show claw and you try your best to say, we can walk away from this at any time. And once you get to the end game where it's brass tacks, I think you have to start thinking about what is best for the betterment of not just yourself, but the betterment of the game and its players and the next generation of people that you have coming up. Because ultimately, that's what you're fighting for within the negotiation. Like, you are fighting for a CBA that is going to be something that controls the destinies of the next, handful of years of kids that are coming into the league and playing pro basketball, right? So I think that it is very interesting that prioritization has kind of been wiped off the table, because I thought that was going to be the next domino to fall. Like, I figured that this would turn into the money piece goes first, the rev share piece goes next, prioritization becomes the next sticking point, because theoretically the argument of the owners would be, we are paying you enough that you should not have to feel like you have to go anywhere else. And you are now representing a significant investment to where you have to be healthy in order for you to meet this investment, And so I think that it's interesting that that's off the table. And it's also notable to me that we are not hearing a lot about any of the other smaller benefits. And this is something that even back in July, Breanna Stewart said to the assembled press after they got out of the room with the WNBA, was that the things that both sides agreed on was some of the maternity benefits and the family leave components and some of the more
retirement.
Yes, like the things that in the last CBA, they fought a lot harder on. There was a lot more work to be done, in fairness to them back then. But it's just interesting to see how much this really just gets distilled down to the money and rev share part.
I think Sue Bird talked about this on her podcast as well, where she was talking about how the way that they did the last CBA is they wanted to set it up so that this conversation could actually just be all about money. Like, they wanted to have, and they're going to make it they're making like slight improvements, everything, but overall, they wanted the benefits aspect to just not even be on the table really as an important part of the negotiation.